Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A tough day in the markets for the Bitcoin miners. Many of the top names trading deep into the red. We're going to be discussing that on today's podcast, in addition to July production results from Hive Digital Technologies and quarterly earnings from both TeraWulf and CleanSpark. A lot to get through. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you're holding any of these three companies and what you thought about their recently reported numbers. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys, a double header for you to kick off the weekend here today. We just came off an interview with Tyler Page, CEO of CIFR Mining. Very insightful in terms of Q2 earnings, HPC strategy. We've got a packed agenda in today's podcast as well. Some earnings and some big production updates that we wanted to address before we get into the weekend. Now, before we get into the specifics, Anthony, taking a look at Bitcoin price, above 116 again, so still in that range. However, the miners, I'm not sure if it's a Friday profit taking or an option expiration, whatever the case is, reacting oversized, I guess, to the downside here. Core Scientific holding up the best. We would expect that as they're more associated with HPC and CoreWeave share price now than Bitcoin. CleanSpark following their Q3 earnings at the bottom of the bunch today.
Yeah, Bitcoin price is still higher than it was at the start of the week, so it's a volatile asset class. But started the week, 5 days ago, 114,000. It's over 116,000 now, and it's been in that range all the way through. So Bitcoin mining stocks are just that bit more volatile, and even the Bitcoin price dropping from 117 to 116,000 has put them all in the red. You're quite right to highlight, some of the biggest losses there, but it's across the board. One thing I look at is the volumes aren't that high, so whether it is just a bit of selling as the price of Bitcoin comes down, and being a Friday as well sometimes. But I had a lot of investors like to sell on a Friday and then come back in on a Monday. With renewed vigor for the rest of the week, but not a strategy I particularly use. I try to be a little bit more, use a bit more fundamental knowledge to get me to where I need to be. But yeah, it's a sea of red today, and we'll just have to play this one out. It doesn't look like it's going to improve. On a positive note, Ethereum went above $4,000 today, so that'll please all the Ethereum treasury management companies out there. There's probably about 100 of those at the moment, and that's not been at 4,000 since since I think December 2024. I think so. Close to 7 or 8 months. It's waited to get back to that level. We've seen Bitcoin actually reach all-time highs, 10 or 15 times this year. But Ethereum struggled, but we're seeing that strength come back into it now. So that'll give the likes of our friend Sam Tabar at Bit Digital a little bit more of a cushion there. But his WhiteFiber stock today coming down again another 10-11%. So just that initial few days before it reaches a level where investors are comfortable at, and they'll maybe come back into that stock. The time will tell, but most of the stock is owned obviously by the Bit Digital shareholders, 80% of it. So I won't be rushing to sell straight away. It looks like they've got some, plenty of customers, good contracts, and let's see what the next earning update brings for them.
Yeah, interesting. I've heard sell in May and go away. I guess people are doing that on a weekly basis now. Sell on Friday, come back Monday. But regardless, Anthony, really it proves our point of why it's so important to take profits in this sector. You talk about the volatility. We just put out a sell strategy video a few weeks back, talking about taking profits, looking at these companies on an individual basis and how they move relevant or independent of one another. So I would definitely encourage you guys, if you weren't able to capture any profits in this most recent little run up, maybe worth taking a look at our Patreon, spend a few bucks a month and potentially save yourself some of these big pullbacks and stress that we've endured in the Bitcoin mining space. Now, in terms of the news, Hive, a double header here, continuing to push the envelope in terms of exahash growth, now up over 15 exahash per second. So congratulations to the team there. looking forward to having them on to talk about that milestone. They also came out with their July production results as well. So maybe we'll get into that portion first.
Yeah, great. Another great month for Hive. Another big update today. That's a 150% increase in hash rate since just the start of the year. And we're only in the month of August, at the start of August. So great to see them achieve that. And they've got some really big targets to get through between now and then. And we'll come on to those in a second. But the operation update is as follows. They mined 203 Bitcoin. That's a 24% increase in what they produced in June. That was helped by the hash rate increasing to an energized hash rate. They achieved 15.1 exahash very recently, and if you look at the operational hash rate, which is the amount of machines that are actually working during the month, that increased from 10.95 to 12.8 exahash. That was an increase of 17%. So that accounted for that increased Bitcoin. And plus, remember what we say, July is an extra day mining worth about 3%. You know, that's how you get close to that 24% increase. So really, really good month for them. In terms of efficiency, they improved the efficiency of their fleet by another 5% in the month of July. Efficiency means if you can improve the efficiency, you're reducing the cost to mine. These machines will run more efficiently than the other machines they've got, and therefore, you know, you're using less power to mine a Bitcoin. So that 5% again it's part of the margin. So you know, great to see. Now they do have, once they complete phase two, they're expected to get to 18.5 exahash. And if you think that's ending there, you'd be thinking again, because by the Thanksgiving date, which is in November, they plan to get to 25 exahash, which is their target for the year. And having had literally an update every week for about the last 4 or 5 weeks with an exahash growth every week, we firmly expect them to achieve those targets by the due dates.
Yeah, we most definitely do. A nice little update there. We had Craig Tavares on talking about Buzz HPC. We're looking forward to having Frank and Aiden back on to talk about earnings and this Paraguay development that's so exciting here to witness. Now, one question I had for you looking at the table, you haven't included a Bitcoin hodl. Why is that this month?
Yeah, this is something that Hive have stopped issuing now for the last couple of operational updates. I mean, for the last 4 years, they've pretty much issued one every month. The hodl, it's a normal metric to include there because we can then determine how much is increased, how many Bitcoin is sold, the value of the hodl, and it gives the investors, you know, transparency that, you know, they're following a certain strategy. Now, Hive have utilized a lot of their Bitcoin this year in terms of paying for their machines for this growth. Now, they've come up with a really, really good idea with Bitmain. They pledged about $200 million of Bitcoin. I think, if I remember right, the pledge was about the price of $86,000. So Bitmain have said you have the opportunity to buy that Bitcoin back at the price you pledged. So, you know, with the price today at 116,000, that means that Hive have got, you know, a 30,000 potential profit per Bitcoin if they buy that Bitcoin back at today's prices. So the expectation is that they'll probably want to do that and benefit from that increased price there. But if the Bitcoin price drops below 86, then there's no requirement to go and do that. So it sort of works in their favor, you know, either way. They can actually, you know, do it, or if the price drops, they can come do that. But it's a good strategy to use. It helped them get that hash rate, which they'll utilize to get to 25 exahash. Yeah, a very sensible strategy in this a very sensible strategy to utilize. But, you know, at the same time, we'd like to know what their Bitcoin hodl is. The last time we saw a hodl from them was from our friends at Hodl 15. And he stated in the tables there, I think it's down to about 404 Bitcoin, but that was the last time there was an update out there. That might have changed in recent days.
Yeah, it would be nice to start to see them resume the updates on HODL. Also nice to see some great pictures coming from the team out of South America here, Paraguay. You can see Frank down there showing off one of their new Hive signs, and the team obviously a group effort here. We talk with the leadership groups a lot on the channel, the CEOs, the C-suite, but realistically, as we heard from Tyler Page, the biggest asset these companies have really is their people or human capital. And you can see Hive, obviously, team growing as they continue to expand. Now, TeraWulf and the Wolf Pack, one that we don't cover a lot on the channel, they've stopped doing their production updates on a monthly basis. So similar to some of the other miners we've seen, like Hut 8, for example. However, they did come out with Q2 earnings. So we wanted to go over some of the high level numbers here. They also gave a quick update on the HPC strategy. So good to get some information or news out from TeraWulf and a little bit more clarity as to what they've been up to.
Yeah, and looking at their update there, they've highlighted that they were able to mine 485 Bitcoin in the quarter. Remember, they don't do monthly updates now, so this will be the first time we've actually acknowledged how many Bitcoin they've mined. Compare that to the 3 months ended Q2 of 2024, where they mined 699. Bear in mind, since then we've had a halving in the mining difficulty. The hash rate is now over 12, or the operational hash rate is 12.2 compared to 8 as it was last year. Power costs as well. So we talk about power costs since the halving. And at that point in time there, 22,954, it's now 45,555 as an average. Now, we've had a halving, which means it costs twice as much to mine the same amount of Bitcoin. But also in that period, we've had a difficulty rise that probably equates to, literally nearly another halving. So to come out with a figure like 45 $1,000 as your energy cost per Bitcoin. That's pretty good. That puts them in line with the likes of CleanSpark, Mara, and Riot. Not quite as low as what IREN and CIFR are achieving, but puts them in the rest of the pack there. Now, bear in mind they've sold the Nautilus site, I think, for about $87 million. And that money was used then to invest and prepare for this HPC strategy. And, they've already got a contract with Core 42, which is for 72.5 megawatts. They have potential to increase that contract. So there was negotiations probably ongoing at the moment. And the more positive thing that came out of the update is the fact that revenues for the Core 42 contract will start to be achieved during Q3. So they actually started in July last month. We also know that from Core Scientific's updates that their revenue started in May. So even though the full service isn't there yet, these things happen in stages and payments will be via the contract. So that's good to see. They have potential at the moment to draw 500 megawatts from the grid with additional approvals pending to reach up to 750 megawatts. So maybe Paul and the team there feel that there's plenty more of opportunity to expand this contract with Core 42 or with another potential client to fit into the Lake Mariner site there. So lots going on. We'll see more and more of their earnings when Patrick releases the 10Q, which should go out after hours today. So we'll be able to have a little bit more look at the figures when that arrives there. Now, the one thing that's affected all the companies up to now that have released is the depreciation charges. That's really put most of the miners into deficit. And even those that have had significant net incomes because of the FESB rules, if you take out the FESB revaluation of Bitcoin, all the miners up to now have come out with a net loss. To be honest with you, we were hoping that CleanSpark might have booked that trend, but they came out with a net loss as well. If you discount the FESB rules. And TeraWulf also came out with a net loss. Now, part of the reason for that, that net loss is the size of the depreciation that's being applied now. Remember, these companies are buying lots of machines to grow, or have been buying lots of machines to grow their hash rate. I've just explained TeraWulf went from 8 exahash to 12 exahash. When you're buying all these machines, you're going to have to depreciate these machines. IREN and CleanSpark both got to 50 very, very quickly. So we noticed in the CleanSpark update, there was over $40 million applied to depreciation in their update there. And in CIFR's, I think it was even higher than that. I think it was close to maybe $90 million applied for depreciation. So some staggering figures out there. And, people will say, well, that's a real cost. It is a real cost. When these miners talk about adjusted EBITDA or cash costs, they extract the non-cash elements, which are depreciation and things like stock compensation, but they're still both very real costs. And we'll come on to show you a little bit more later in the discussion about a table highlighting how these costs have been put together.
Yeah, we definitely will. And interesting to see those costs adding up. That's a very real concern on the HPC front as well. If you're doing the vertical integration GPU purchase strategy, very CapEx intensive. And as you say, you have to account for that cost somewhere in the company. So we'll get into CleanSpark in a second here. The other thing I just wanted to mention on TeraWulf, they've pushed the actual earnings conference call itself to early next week. So I'm not sure what the reason for that is. Some people are speculating potentially news. We'll see. Time will tell there, but good to get some more detail or color put on the story here early next week. Now, CleanSpark, you just alluded to, was not able to make a profit. We were hoping this one could buck the trend. We can go through their results here. I mentioned in the intro, the market itself obviously responding negatively to the numbers they saw. CleanSpark down over 6%, bottom of the bunch, I guess, so to speak, today in terms of the miners. You can go through the numbers. Then we wanted to give an update on that table you've provided, Anthony, the big five, so to speak, comparing the actuals to the estimates so far.
Yeah. So in terms of CleanSpark, they did have a net income of 257 million, but the majority of that, and more of that net income was actually because of the increased valuation of Bitcoin. If you extract that out there, it was actually a loss for position there. Adjusted EBITDA increased to 377 million. So with adjusted EBITDA, you take the net income and you take away all the non-cash items. And in theory, I mean, you think they should be taking out the non-cash item of the increased valuation, because that's certainly not a cash item. That's just a valuation increase there. But that's kept in and it boosts the adjusted EBITDA. So 377 million EBITDA. That's up from a negative adjusted EBITDA of 12.6 million from the same period a year ago. So that's a vast improvement there. Some of the things that really caught my attention is the fact that for a company that's valued at about $3 billion, their total assets on the balance sheet are more than the actual market cap of the company, $3.1 billion. So you've got a net asset value. You're investing $1 in CleanSpark at the moment. You're effectively getting more than $1 in assets. That's not the same for a lot of other companies. A lot of other companies, their net asset value might be, 60% of their market cap, because the market determines they might have a premium for some of the potential revenues they're going to improve. And that might apply to some of those miners that are going down the HPC route. So IREN and CIFR arguably will have net asset values significantly less than a dollar for a dollar market cap. But CleanSpark booking the trend here, and there'll be other miners also. I think DMG is certainly, their assets is higher than their market cap as well. So that's a positive note there. In terms of some of their costs, they kept the stock compensation down quite low there, but they've issued themselves a dividend again, and this has caused a lot of controversy in social media land with regards to the retail investors. They set this up quite a long time ago, so it's not like it's just happened, but they have some preference dividends or preference shares that attract a dividend based on EBITDA. And if the EBITDA is positive, then it's generally 2% of that. And so they've managed to attract, I think it's about $5.7 million just for the quarter in dividends. That will go to three of the directors at CleanSpark. This is the second dividend in the last few quarters that's been issued. So this is another way of effectively boosting the salary packages. I'm not a great fan of if you've raised if you've achieved the net income through mining revenue and having reduced costs, then absolutely. But this is based on the FASB rules, and the FASB rules, when you've got that sort of a hodl, can work in favor one earnings, and you get the dividend. Bitcoin price drops, you don't get a dividend, but then you're then rallying from that drop price the next period where you probably get it again. So this could be a nice conveyor belt for for this mining company in achieving, future dividends. And that's another 2%. I mean, at the moment, they're also getting, some of the Bitcoin that's produced each month. So there's a lot of things going into this, into these salary packages for chief execs of these mining companies. And it is a question, and retail investors are starting to ask some more questions about them. But that was something to highlight there. In terms of, where we look at for mining a Bitcoin, so the energy cost supporting the cost to mine a Bitcoin for CleanSpark is 44,795, which is just slightly lower than what we've just announced for TeraWulf, but not as attractive as what IREN potentially will bring out. We know what the energy costs for the actual quarter, even though they've not released their numbers because they put that in their operational update each month. So they're at 25,887. That's a good difference below. And CIFR Mining, whose results came out yesterday, they're at 31,570. But if you look at Mara, Riot, TeraWulf and CleanSpark, they're very much the same. They're the same sort of margins. In terms of operating costs, very much the same as previously there. And so their total cash cost to mine a Bitcoin, $64,016 there. And compare that to today's price of 116,000. That's not a bad margin to have there. But bear in mind, we're not including some of the big non-cash costs. So stock compensation would be another $2,231 per Bitcoin to add. And depreciation, that was $47,000 per coin to add on there. So if you're looking at nearly $50,000 per Bitcoin. If you add that to the total cash of a Bitcoin, that would have put them into a negative position for that quarter in terms of the cost to mine would be exceeding the value of the Bitcoin mined itself. So that's been the same for the likes of CIFR, Mara, and Riot, who've released their numbers. As I say, IREN released theirs probably in early September, and it's expected at the moment that they'll come inside their revenue numbers. But bear in mind, Bitcoin price today is 116,000. During that quarter, the average Bitcoin price was around about 98,500. So we're looking at sort of already a $17,500 per coin increase in revenue. And if that continues to rise there, that puts the miners in a slightly better position than they were in Q2. So maybe getting closer and closer to bringing out some real net income numbers.
Good commentary there. Appreciate you putting the numbers all together in this spreadsheet for us. And the other thing I wanted to just mention, interesting what you discussed there about the dividend policy, how the component of the fair value Bitcoin makes up obviously a large component of that and that yo-yo. So in my head, I'm thinking essentially if Bitcoin, as an example, bounced from 100 to 200, back to 100, back to 200, they would essentially get the dividend every other quarter just based on that yo-yo effect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely can see why there's some concerns there. Again, we've talked a lot about stock-based comp. We've talked to most of the management teams directly. That question has been posed, and some different or innovative ways teams are getting around that concern, I suppose. So let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, not only on the dividend policy, but also on CleanSpark numbers, TeraWulf numbers, and Hive hitting that 15 exahash milestone. If you're still watching at this point, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here on Monday.